walking through the woods with this giant woman, and I really want to just like put my face in her boobs, and that's like kind of what it felt like for like 75% of the book. Hello everyone, happy December. How is that possible? My name is Cari. Welcome to my channel. Thank you for being here. It is a very cold and rainy day here. I'm surprised it's not snowing, honestly. It's very cold. So I'm taking this opportunity to put my pajamas on and chat with you about books. If you've watched some of my previous videos that have kind of come out within the past month, you might have heard me complaining about how this was kind of a difficult month reading wise. I had a lot of DNFs. I just couldn't figure out what was wrong, and a lot of these books were partially it was that I wasn't mood reading. I was reading based on what was coming in from the library, and I had a lot of holds, so I was kind of forcing myself to read things that I maybe wasn't in the mood for. And then also when I get in a slump and I like DNF one book, then it makes it so much harder for me to get into the next book, and I have like concentration issues and I'm just frustrated. So as always, when I say that I'm DNFing a book, well, 90% of the time, I truly believe that books come to you at the right time. So just because I DNF'd a book doesn't mean it's like a bad book or that I wouldn't like it in the future. It's just at this point in time, it did not hit, and my brain and the book just did not connect as they should. So I'm going to talk about my DNFs. I'm going to talk about what I read. I ended up finishing the month strong, so that's always a good thing. And I read kind of a mix of genres actually this month. I have quite a lot to talk about, but first I would like to give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, which is Skillshare, who you know and love. Skillshare is an online learning platform that can teach you anything from really niche hobbies to skills that you can use to further your career, such as UI UX design. There's a lot of like marketing and project management classes. I always talk about their creative writing classes because I think that the wealth of knowledge that can be found in just the creative writing area of Skillshare alone is absolutely fabulous. So I'm gonna have a link down below. The first 500 people to click that link will get 1 month free of Skillshare. I just think if you maybe in 2024 you are interested in finally getting into writing, but also maybe getting into embroidery, but also becoming a graphic designer or an illustrator, I don't know, Skillshare is a great resource. Definitely check them out. Also in 2024, if you are interested in starting vlogging, if you are finally like, I've always wanted to start a YouTube channel, but I've never felt ready, I have a class on Skillshare that literally just walks you through the basics and kind of is a massive pep talk for why you are never going to be ready, and so you should just do it. And so yeah, I will also link that down below, but much love to Skillshare. Thank you so much. Link in the description box for you. And let's begin. I kind of cheated, and the first two, almost actually maybe three books, I technically started in October. So this is an October and November reading wrap up. The first one I read is not a short story, but a shorter book called Foe. And I picked this up because I stumbled upon the trailer for a film based on this book with Saoirse Ronan and Paul Mescal, who I love both of them. I will watch anything that Saoirse's in. So I immediately was like, oh, this looks really interesting. And I wanted to read the book first. This is a little sci-fi novel that I enjoyed. What are my notes? Written very matter of fact, a little choppy, but that made it so easy to consume. I read it in one day and liked the twists. So yeah, this is a story about a couple who live in the future, but it's one of those futures where like they live on a farm with no one around, so it almost feels like the olden times. But it is the future, and one of them basically gets their name drawn from a lottery where the government, not the government, but like a large corporation is working on making a like colony on another planet, because apparently we don't get much like actual world building about what happens outside of their little life. but I guess, you know, the world is kind of crumbling. We need another planet, you know. And so one of their names gets pulled because in order to actually test how humans will react to being sent to another planet, they need people who wouldn't necessarily volunteer, right? They want people who maybe never want to leave their farm kind of thing, right? So they go through the process of like, hey, you're in the lottery and your name got picked, but like you might not even go. We're just going to do some tests and like try to understand you. And then you start to see it become something totally different, and it's very eerie. And I thought one thing was happening, especially if you watch the trailer. I think I still haven't seen the movie. It got really bad reviews, unfortunately. I still haven't seen it, but watching the trailer kind of skewed my thoughts because I think that they might have changed the plot a little bit, because I was expecting one thing and then you find out something else is happening, and then there's it was just like a classic little sci-fi book that was good and I enjoyed it. And like I said, it's choppy for a reason. If you don't like the writing style in the beginning, you might want to push through. And yeah, it was definitely one of those like one shot, I read it in like one night kind of book, and it was good. I'm upset that I think it got like really bad reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and I'm shocked. So let me know if you've seen the movie, but the book was absolutely fine if you're looking for just a quick little sci-fi thing. Nothing super revolutionary, but that was called Foe. Okay, and next up I read Paladins Strength. If you watched my wrap up from last month, I read Paladins Grace, which is by T. Kingfisher, who is on track to be my most read author of the year. T. Kingfisher has like taken over my life, which is so funny because I always say this, but I personally didn't love Nettle and Bone. Maybe I need to reread it, but like Nettle and Bone wasn't a hit for me, but every other book I have read by T. Kingfisher has been like top of my list, which is wild. Anyway, so last month I read Paladins Grace, and it's a part of a currently, I guess, like a 3-book series that are individual, like they're standalones, but they're all kind of connected within the world. And I really, really love Paladins Grace because it's a fantasy, but it's essentially just about these two slightly damaged adults who are really awkward, and they fall in love, and you just have to watch them painfully flirt. And I really, really loved Paladins Grace. And all of you guys were saying that Paladins Strength, which is the next one, is the best one. And so I went in being like, how are they going to top Paladins Grace? And I've got to say, they didn't. I loved Paladins Strength, but I do not think it holds a candle to Paladins Grace. I still think the Paladins Grace is the best one so far. I haven't read the third. Paladins Strength focuses on one of my favorite characters from the first book, and he is sent off on a mission. He ends up getting accidentally tethered to this woman who has a whole backstory I'm not going to get into. He is essentially trying to help her on her mission while also completing his mission, and then we find out secrets about everybody, and it just, I don't want to tell you too much about it. It's just like this cute little fantasy, okay? The thing is, I really loved our main character's banter in the first book, and I feel like because he was like off on his own a lot in this book, or like just him and our female main character, the banter wasn't quite as quick. And also, like, I understand that this is the whole point of this novel, but our main woman is big. She's like this really just physically intimidating person, and that's just talked about so much that I was just kind of like, okay. It was also a lot more like immediately kind of smutty. Like they just are constantly daydreaming about doing like dastardly things with each other. And I feel like Paladins Grace was much more slow burn, and like our main character knits socks, and this guy, I forget what his vice is, but like, I don't know. I still enjoyed it, but I think that I went into it with high expectations, and it was just a little bit more of like, we're walking through the woods with this giant woman, and I really want to just like put my face in her boobs, and that's like kind of what it felt like for like 75% of the book. Maybe not my favorite, but still I really enjoyed the world. Not a waste of my time. Paladins Strength. And then after that, because it was November, I was getting into my dark academia phase, and one of the kind of quintessential dark academia books that I haven't read yet is These Violent Delights. This was not what I expected. What did I write? My notes are that I loved the beginning, and then by the 3/4 mark, I was sort of bored. The ending was just so sad. Yeah, so this is a book about two boys who meet at school and they are just kind of magnetically drawn to each other. They become inseparable and it just becomes, first it's just like a toxic friendship and then it becomes so much bigger than that. Like I said, I really enjoyed the beginning, like them getting to know each other, kind of just being in school. They weren't academic rivals. They were very much like, they felt like the only people who understood each other intellectually. And I also thought it was interesting, one of the boys comes from a very rich background, and then when we get like that side of his life, I was very drawn to it. Like the imagery, I could see the book very, very clearly. Then once things start to take like a real big turn, first of all, I was shocked because I thought it was going one way and it went another, but I was sort of like, this is so just like uncomfy and sad, and I just don't want to see everybody go down the roads that they're going down, that I kind of lost interest. I felt like we kind of hit this point where we were like, oh no, I see what's coming, and then we just kept driving towards the horizon and it just never really came. So I thought the ending, like the last 3/4 could have been tightened up a little bit so that we could just be kind of hit with that ending. But overall, I do think if you're interested in dark academia, just very tragic, toxic relationships, I do recommend it. It was just sort of like, I want everybody to get off of this ride right now, including me. If you like books with that feeling, These Violent Delights. And after that, oh my gosh, so last month you heard me talk about, and even my last video, I talked about the Throne in the Dark series. I had only read the first one last month, and this month I finished it. I read the second and third book. These are so silly. These books are so dumb, in the best way. So I already talked about it before, so I'll try to be brief, but we basically follow our main character who is half demon, and he is raised knowing and appreciating the fact that he is a villain, right? He's supposed to be like this horrible, evil person, and like they have conventions, like it's very A Little Despicable Me-esque. And he is really, really bad at being a villain because he's deep down, he's a good guy. And we start off the book with him going off on this quest to try and save his father from the crystal that he has been captured in or whatever. During that quest, he accidentally runs into our main girl who is on a completely different quest. They are now, unfortunately for both of them, inseparable, and their quests converge, right? And so the first book was really just that, and just like getting to know the characters, getting to know the world and the rhythm, and then it ended in such a way that I knew the second and third books would have more action, and it felt like a much more, well, the second book felt like a much more traditional fantasy plot where we had like an actual villain, no offense to our fake villain. The second book was so fun. The third book was just silly. A bunch of weird mini adventures and so much, oh yeah, so much interrupted steamy moments that it started to be silly. So yes, if you want like the slowest slow burn to the point where it becomes a joke, how anytime there's like a moment it gets interrupted, this is your book. It started to get annoying. It was like funny the first maybe 5 times, and then I was like, yes, damn it, you know? But it was just funny. If you're looking for something fluffy and stupid, definitely try it out. I loved the first 2 books. I think the third book was just a little long. There were scenes, there were vast portions of the book where I was like, wait, where are we? What are we doing? But at the same time, the characters, especially our 2 main characters, were so fun that I was willing to put up with it. But yeah, it's on Kindle Unlimited. I highly recommend the Throne in the Dark series as a whole. Enjoy. After that, I picked up another purple book. I feel like I don't really read books with purple covers, and here I am with My Roommate is a Vampire. I waited for this book on hold at the library for so long, to the point where I almost bought it because I was just like, if so many people want to read it, it's got to be good. Why am I waiting so damn long for a book that I'm gonna read in like 2 hours, you know? I'm glad I didn't buy it. I must have missed something. I did not get anything from this book. This book was so hyped. People loved it, and it was just bad. So it takes place in Chicago. Our main girl is an artist. She's having a really rough time financially, and she finds this impossible Craigslist listing for a house, like this gorgeous apartment. You're gonna share it with just one person, but because of his weird schedule, you'll probably never see each other, and it's like $200 a month. No. And for some reason, her and her best friend decide, like, yeah, this is really sketchy, but we should still check it out. And she goes, and turns out, first of all, her roommate would be so hot. She opens the door and she's like, what the fuck is this supermodel doing living in this weird apartment? The apartment looks like it was decorated from like the 1800s. He dresses like he's from the 1800s, which was something I could not get over the whole book. He dresses in like a top hat and like a tie. Anyway, she decides to take the offer. She's like, I have nowhere else to go. Let me move in here. And of course, title of the book, this is not a spoiler, he's a vampire. And he essentially wants to use her to teach him how to like exist in the present day, because for reasons we'll find out, he's like not been around, and in order for vampires to survive, they need to know how to blend in, and clearly with his freaking top hat, he's not blending in. He wants her to help him understand how the world works. And there are moments in it where it was cute. Like he like talks to himself. They communicate a lot through letters. There are these moments where I'm like, okay, this is a funny line, or this is a funny scene. I just could not get into it. The chemistry was not there at all. It was just so bland and bizarre. Like it wasn't, again, like there were funny lines, but that made me just be like, oh, that was a funny line that she wrote. It wasn't like, I never fell into the book. And then I thought I read it wrong, but like the ending where there's like the third act crisis, I literally thought I read it wrong because it ends, it's like resolved so fast that I was like, am I missing pages? What's going on? So yeah, if you read it and enjoyed it, please let me know. But like, I was just very shocked by how much of nothing it was giving me. And I was bummed because I was like, ooh, a cute little vampire rom-com for autumn. Not the case. That was my roommate is a vampire. After that, I read The Berry Pickers. I believe this is a newly released book. This was so interesting. This is a dual POV. It follows a family who are indigenous to Canada, and during summers they will go down, they like work odd jobs anywhere that they can, and during summer typically they go down to Maine and they work picking blueberries. And one summer, the youngest sibling of the family disappears. Was she taken? Was she killed in an accident? What have you? And we just follow the family from that event. It's a dual POV. So one POV is the youngest son, who was the last one to see the daughter, to see his sister, and his just kind of very upsetting life. And then we follow a girl. Does she live in like Massachusetts or something? Yeah, I think she lives somewhere in New England, but like not Maine. She doesn't look like her parents, and there's no evidence of her childhood before she was 5 years old because there was a fire. Just odd stuff. So I mean, you know who she is, right? It's not a spoiler. And we just see both of their lives and like how this one event obviously changed their lives. I thought it was the perfect length, and I thought that both of the characters were so interesting. I don't know, it was just like I said, the perfect length, the perfect amount of, this sounds bad, but like the perfect amount of pain. Like this book is so sad and they go through such horrible things, but it didn't feel gimmicky. Like it felt like, oh yeah, this absolutely has happened to people. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I was kind of surprised. I went into it not knowing how I would feel, and I was so drawn in to the story. And yeah, just a surprising read, something that I kind of picked up at the library on a whim, and ended up being really good. So that is The Berry Pickers. After that, look who makes another appearance. Oh my god. T. Kingfisher is back, everybody. I read The Clockwork Boys and then the sequel, this is a duology, the sequel called The Wonder Engine. This takes place in the same world as Paladins Grace and Paladins Strength, and I think I overdid it. I would recommend, as much fun as these books are, and I did enjoy Clockwork Boys, I would recommend spreading them out, because reading so much in that world, it got a little, not necessarily repetitive, but like there are just these very kind of quintessential T. Kingfisher things, especially in this book and this world, that I think I would have enjoyed it more if I had like not consumed them all at once. But The Clockwork Boys was really funny. This takes place in a kind of separate area within the world, so you can read this without knowing anything. You can start with Clockwork Boys. And this follows a kind of suicide squad. They are tasked with crossing through this kind of war zone, no man's land, to get into enemy territory and figure out how they are producing this, like, they're like robots, you could kind of think of, or like these clockwork, these machines that are warriors that are just like decimating everybody that they set their sights on. And so obviously the country that we are starting our story in is losing the war, and everyone they've sent, like special forces, Navy SEALs, like whatever the heck, dead, missing, gone, dead. And so they're like, all right, last ditch effort, let's just send a murderer, like people who are basically already on like death row, send them. So the actual plot of this book doesn't matter. And I know I said that about Paladins Grace too. It was interesting. I think that T. Kingfisher is so great because she writes fantasy and she's willing to go for it. Like the thing about fantasy is that you create your own world, right? The author is making everything up. And so why not have like a bizarre magical machine that no one knows where it came from, and it just like has weird powers, like you put in a pear and out pops a fish. Why not? And T. Kingfisher just goes there. She just makes these kind of bonkers, weird things. And so I did really love the world, and I did really actually think the plot was quite interesting, but you are reading it for these characters. I thought the banter was so good. I didn't buy the chemistry so much with, I guess I just didn't love the love interest as much as I loved the others that T. Kingfisher has written, but I just thought the banter, the found family, it was just so funny. Like I don't even want to go into it. You just have to discover it yourself. But it was a duology. It's finished. Yeah, it was a good time. But again, I do think spread it out. If you are reading Paladins Grace or Paladins Strength, give yourself time to read Clockwork Boys. I read that probably like the beginning of November. I did just get Sword Heart on from the library, so I know that that's also part of the same world, and I think I've given myself enough time, and I've also just read kind of dud books, so I'm happy to read one I know I'm gonna like. So I am reading Sword Heart. For all of you guys in the comments who are recommending it, I heard you. I'm with you. But yeah, that was Clockwork Boys. Definitely fun. Just a good time. And here we reach our DNFs. Technically, I read one book in between these, but I'm just gonna tell you my DNFs 3 in a row. Okay, I think there was another one, but honestly, I only read like a chapter and I was like, no. So, first one is God of Endings. This one started off really strong. This is a vampire novel that ends up being, I think, a lot more like philosophical than vampire novels, especially of this day and age, tend to be. My notes say it was good but sort of mundane. I read 40% and then I felt like the story hadn't even started yet. And yes, so We follow a girl who lives in this tiny village where I believe it's tuberculosis is like rapidly spreading, and everybody thinks it's like because of witchcraft. So the book starts off with this whole like very kind of medieval witch hunt superstition thing going on, and then we move to our main girl becomes a vampire, and then we split into two different timelines. So now we're in the future. We're in the 80s. We're in the 1980s where like kids are wearing neon and like it's very weird. It's a strange little book. We're in the 80s. Our main girl is now acting as a teacher. She is running a kind of French kindergarten or something. She's in America, but like these hella rich kids get sent to her kindergarten where they speak French and they make art. And we just kind of follow her life there, where this is just who she is for this chapter of her life. And she finds that she's getting weird blood cravings, but like we'll get into that in a second. And one of her students, the dad might be abusive, so she's like, do I get involved with that? And then we get the other timeline, which is her and her first few years being a vampire and like living with this other vampire kid and stuff like that. I don't know, like it had all these pieces that I thought were really interesting, but again, I was at 40% of the book and I still felt like we were laying groundwork for something that was gonna happen. And I feel like by 40% I should kind of have an idea. Like the plot should have picked up a little bit, but in this case it was just kind of this monotony of like, I don't know. So like I said, I think it had a lot of elements that were great, so you might want to try it. But for me, it was just so slow. So that was God of Endings. That was a DNF. And then these two, I feel like are going to be controversial. The first one is House of Marion. I waited for this one as well a really long time at the library. And I think part of it was my concentration issues. I was already having trouble, like because of the slump that was oncoming. I was having trouble focusing, but it took me ages to get 100 pages into this book. I just didn't quite get it. We follow a girl who, her and her mother are constantly moving around. They're clearly running from something, but our main girl just doesn't know what. And it turns out that she has magic powers, but they're the bad kind. She has like normal powers, but she also has a kind that like magic people shouldn't have. So she was supposed to grow up in the magic world. Her family is very important in the magic world, and her mom took her and they ran away for safety. Things end up happening that take her right back into the world, and she enrolls in a magic academy where her grandmother is like the headmaster, or just like she's the president. I don't know what she is, but she's very important. I read, like I said, 100 something pages, and I just don't know what it was. I think part of it was that things happened not so easily, but like things just occurred. It was like, I don't want to spoil anything, but it was, the plot moved very quickly, but almost too quickly, and like in a way that it was super convenient. Other than our main girl, there wasn't a character that was introduced outside of our main girl that we could really latch onto and like create a relationship with either. Like it's very focused on the main character so far. I know who's supposed to be the love interest, and the world was kind of explained but kind of not, and I felt like I wasn't quite grasping it in terms of like the different houses and then what you are. Like each house has a different thing, and like what was he called, like a defender, whatever they're called, or like they're like assassin. I don't know. I think part of it was definitely my concentration, but I just kind of was hoping to be pulled in to the world, and it just sort of felt like I have read this before and I'm not attached to any character other than our main character. So, House of Marion, which let me know because I know a lot of people really loved it. So please tell me your thoughts. And then after that, this actually was a funny one. So many of you guys recommended Dark Rise to me, and when I finally got it out of the library, my Kindle, like if you read with a Kindle, if you have already read a book, it usually will start you, it's kind of like a VHS, like you have to rewind it, right? So if you finished a book, it will usually open at like the last page or the acknowledgements page, right? But in this case, I apparently at some point in my life had already read 40% of this book. So it opened at 40% and I was like, I have not read this book. What are you talking about? So somehow, somewhere, I DNF'd this book at 40%. I went to the beginning, read it again, and I stopped at about 49%. I don't know what it is. I really like the characters. It was just so slow. It just wasn't hitting. Whatever I wanted from it, it was just not hitting at all. So Dark Rise takes place in London, but it calls back to a much earlier time where there were like magic people and there was this war where darkness and light fought, and now there's only this flicker. There's like a small group of the light people still staying strong, trying to hold off the darkness, and the humans, the non-magic humans, just kind of like forgot and went on living life, right? And it seems like the darkness is coming back. So we follow like specifically 2 kids who get tied up in this based on just their bloodlines, let's say. Yeah, it gave me nothing, unfortunately. So that was my second time DNFing that book, allegedly, and that was Dark Rise. So I apologize to everybody who recommended it in the comments, but not this time. But luckily, after that, I read The Spirit Bears Its Teeth. I think it was earlier this year. I read Hell Followed With Us? Hell Followed? Anyway, I read another book by this author and it's very much horror. There's specifically body horror. So please go into any books by this author knowing that it is going to be a gruesome time. But this one, I think I liked it even more than Hell Followed With Us, if I'm remembering that book title correctly. The Spirit Bears Its Teeth is a fantasy, but it also pulls on a lot of references to like Victorian boarding schools. There's a lot of like communing with the dead. Like it's very Victorian, but like the grossest parts of Victorian society. We have a lot of like women are mad and so they get thrown away into the like sanitariums or whatever. Very much this. So the story takes place in a world where within the past century, all of a sudden people started to be born with purple eyes. And if you have purple eyes, you can see the spirit realm. You're able to like wield this particular kind of magic. And so just like Victorian society, women are only seen as being able to produce heirs. They have made it so that women are not able to use their powers, right? And so much of society is just like making sure that purple-eyed girls get paired off and they can make a lot of purple-eyed boy babies. It's very uncomfortable. It's very sick. And so we follow our main character who is not okay with this, not only just because it's gross to like have 16-year-old, sometimes 14-year-old girls be paired off with these old men to have children, but also because our main character is not a girl. And obviously their parents don't accept this, but like their older brother called them by their chosen name and gave him the clothes that he's comfortable in, supported him, but society always wins. And so when our main character tries to pull one little stunt in order to escape their fate of being married off to someone that they don't even know, that ends up getting them sent to this kind of boarding school, this like finishing school for fine young ladies, and it's all like girls who have fucked up in a plethora of ways that you can fuck up in Victorian society. It goes on from there. So like I said, this is first and foremost, like, yes, it's a fantasy, but like the subgenre is body horror. Please know that there's so much gore in it. And this is also very much tied to images of conversion therapy. There is so much sexual assault. It's dark, but I really liked it. I liked the conversations that were had, and the world was just built really well. Like I always am fascinated by standalone fantasies when an author can create a world in just a couple hundred pages, and I get it. So yeah, I really appreciated it, and it was another purple book. I've read so many purple books this month. Yes, The Spirit Bears Its Teeth. Next up, like I said, I was dealing with my DNFs where I was working so hard to finish these books and I just couldn't get anywhere with them. So I ended up picking up a book that my mom recommended called The 8 Lives of a Century-Old Trickster. This is kind of a Korean history lesson. Basically, the prologue is we follow a person who works at a nursing home, and she decides to help everybody write their obituaries. So she goes up to this woman, and the woman's like, well, you're not gonna believe my story. And she ends up going through her story. She's like, I've lived 8 lives. I've been a murderer. I've been a spy. I've been a mother. And we go through each of those lives. Things that I liked about it, I loved that it wasn't in chronological order, so certain stories kind of hit you harder because you didn't know what was coming or because you knew what was coming. So I think that the way that the stories were arranged was really great. I learned quite a few new things I didn't know. Like, obviously I knew that during the war, Japan and America used comfort women, aka like kidnapped Korean women, and forced them into sex work. But I didn't know that a lot of women were taken from Korea to Indonesia to work. I had no idea about that. So I did learn quite a few things, but at the end of the day, I think it was a little bit, again, partially maybe because of my concentration issues, but there were certain parts of it that I really understood and I got, but then we started to veer. We like followed another character, and I was sort of like, but is this her life or is it the other character's life? Is she the other character? Because there are some stories where like you aren't sure who she is in the story until like a certain point. I'm not explaining this well, but I was just kind of confused as like, wait, so are we veering off from her story? So it just, especially kind of towards the end, like I would say the 75% mark, I was getting a little confused about who was telling the story. So it wasn't my favorite, but I learned things, and it kind of pushed me out of it didn't push me out of a reading slump, but like it was the first book that I had finished in like a week. So it felt really good. So that is the 8 Lives of a Century-Old Trickster. Okay, but what really got me out of my reading slump, thank you, Suzanne Collins, I read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I had no interest in it when it came out, and then because of the movie, I was like, well, here we go. And I read the book, and I was at like 50% of the book, and I opened my phone and made a reservation to see the movie the next day. I was like, yes, I am committed. I am fully locked and loaded into this world again. So I actually, instead of rereading The Hunger Games, I watched the movies because they are pretty true to the book. So I watched those, and then I dove in to Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which I do recommend having a refresher because there are certain like names dropped that I wouldn't have remembered, that it's like good to know what they are in the future when you're reading this book. So if you don't know, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is the prequel to The Hunger Games, and we follow President Snow as a young adult and kind of what set him on the path to become the villain of The Hunger Games. And I will say this, Suzanne wanted to write a villain origin story, and I think she succeeded. I think my issue is that I maybe don't like villain origin stories. I liked the book. I love her writing. It's just so easy to eat up. I love her because she writes for young adults, but it never feels like she's writing for young adults. It feels like she has such a respect for the intelligence of her reader. She is able to talk about kind of complex issues and like these kind of philosophical questions that are so interesting and important in today's day and age. I mean, they never stop being interesting and important, but I feel like especially right now with what's going on in the world, it's very important to read. But it never felt like she was over explaining it or that she was kind of dumbing it down to make it easier. She just, I don't know, I love that about her writing. And so for Ballad, we follow Coriolanus as he has to be a mentor for the Hunger Games, and he gets assigned the girl from District 12, and he has to make sure that she performs well and hopefully maybe wins in order to kind of get this scholarship that he wants. I did see the movie as well. The book did something that the movie couldn't do, which was we got to see in his head so much more. And he was just so, I don't know if there was a point where he could have been saved, like, or if he could have like turned and changed the path he was on. It also made it much more apparent from the movie, like, how desperate he was. Like, the Snow family after the war, their situation is really horrible in terms of like their social standing. They have no money, they have no food, and it just made him and his situation much more dire. It made the stakes much higher for him than I think it did in the movie. So I really, really loved kind of up until and even through the whole Hunger Games. But when the Hunger Games ends and we embark on what happens after, I didn't like any of that. I did not love a single thing. This is also from his point of view. He has such a disdain for people around him that all the characters felt quite unlovable as well, just because of how we see it through his lens. So I didn't really like any character. Tigress is my girl and always will be, but like, we know how he's gonna end up, right? So I wasn't like hoping for a redemption story. I kind of, as you're reading it, you know that this is a villain origin story. So I was just kind of like dreading it. Sort of like with These Violent Delights, how you can see that, oh God, this is going to end badly and I don't want to be on this ride, So that's why I say maybe like Suzanne did what she set out to do, but I also don't recommend reading the book and then less than 24 hours later going to see the movie, because my faith in humanity was at an all-time low. After that, it was like too much villain. Gotta go back and read Throne in the Dark. After that, this was a random recommendation from Bookstagram, and it was a very quick read. This was called The Last Language. I went into it not knowing anything, to be honest, and I was sort of, as I was reading it, this was another like, I want to get off this ride kind of book. And immediately, the only thing I could think of to compare it to is Lolita. So this is a book about a woman who is hit kind of by tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. Her husband dies, she has a miscarriage, she loses her job and her fellowship. She is asked to take a leave of absence from her PhD program, so she loses her stipend. She has to move in with her mother all at once. And the only job that she's able to get, because she does have a daughter as well, and she needs to support her, the only job she is able to get is working on this controversial therapy for non-verbal people. Sorry, new battery. So she studied linguistics, and so she is brought on to work on this controversial therapy where she helps people who are nonverbal communicate using basically a typewriter, but maybe they have some kind of physical disability where using a typewriter isn't an option, kind of thing. So she trains for quite a while. She's worked with other patients, but the first patient she gets to work with solo is this man who's around her age, and they start working together. He immediately takes to the therapy, and they develop this relationship that eventually turns romantic. But the thing is, we're told this story from the main character's point of view, and she's essentially, this is where Lolita comes in. She is essentially writing this letter. The whole book is like this record of like her side of the story, because she is in jail because the family found out about their romantic relationship that became physical. Spoilers incoming, sorry, I went off the rails, and you can skip to this section. Sorry, my bad. Because the story all hinges on he seems to only be able to communicate when she is helping him use the machine. And it's sort of like, is she fabricating it? Like the question is basically like, is she telling the truth? Is he really communicating with her? And have they really fostered this consensual romantic relationship? Or did she fabricate this whole thing and convince herself, because she does clearly have these tendencies of like obsession, and she's gone through so much, like she's lost so much in a short amount of time, and even she questions it, like, it's so weird that he has my exact sense of humor when I type with him. Like, did we just magically find... I don't know. I thought it was interesting, but also like those kind of stories where you're questioning whether something is sexual assault isn't really my cup of tea. I would also say like the linguistic aspect to it, it kind of felt like she did rudimentary linguistic research. Like anything that she mentioned about linguistics that was like, wow, you know, look at this linguistics concept. It's like I knew it, which I'm interested in it, but I've never really studied linguistics. But like if you have ever studied a language, like you probably know the stuff that she talks about, and she's like a PhD candidate. So I was sort of expecting a little bit more. It wasn't my favorite. I would say it, for the amount of kind of that it makes you feel, I didn't think that it necessarily had anything profound to say. That's the last language. Okay, and then just in this past week, it was like a dam breaking. I had that slump, and then I was like, here we go. 3 in a row, great books. Number 1, I read Little Thieves. If you watched my previous video about unfinished series that I'm hoping to start, Little Thieves was on top of that list, and I'm not mad that I started it. So Little Thieves follows a girl who, her mother was the 13th daughter in her family, and Vanya, our main girl, is the 13th daughter of that family. So she's the 13th daughter of a 13th daughter, and so she's cursed. And so her mom just like brings her into the woods to abandon her. She ends up becoming the goddaughter of, like the adopted daughter of the gods of death and fortune, and she is raised by them. She ends up, like, now that she's a teenager, she ended up working in a kind of royal household, or like a noble household, and her big thievery, this isn't a spoiler because this happens in the first chapter and it is written on the back of the book, but her big heist is that she steals the princesses that she's working with. She steals the princess's identity. And basically what she wants to do is she wants to use the princess's access to the royal world to gather up enough funds so that she can run away, for reasons we will find out. But it was a really bad time to become the princess, because she is engaged to this horrible, icky man. And because of all the recent burglaries that our main girl has done, right? She also has a detective on her tail. So she's just like in this horrible, horrible mess. It honestly took me a really long time to get into. I do think that the world was a little messy in terms of like the hierarchy and stuff was not complex, but like just complex enough that we didn't get it explained quite enough, but it's also an important piece of the world that I was a little lost there. And like, I don't really think Vanya found her voice because it's very sarcastic, and Vanya is making a lot of these really funny, sly comments just to the reader. So it took me a little bit to like get into her voice as well. But there was just this part in the story. It was before the 40% mark, because by the time I got to the 40% mark, I was like, yes, I am locked and loaded. Like, I think it was probably like the 30% mark where I was like, something clicked and I was like, okay. And then when I got to 40, I remember looking down and being like, yes, she did it, I'm in. There's like a cute little romance. What I really liked about it is that the author can really write these very specific emotions. There's a scene where Vanya is trying to explain herself. She's been like accused of doing something that she didn't do, and no one believes her. And the way that it's described of like, you know, that feeling when you're trying to be like, no, I'm not lying, and everyone is like, yeah, sure, whatever, we don't believe you. That like tightness in your chest, she was able to write that. Like, I physically felt so many emotions in that book where I felt myself like closing in on myself and being like, no, please believe me, you know? She wrote these little things really, really well. Overall, I thought the plot was like a teensy bit messy, but it was worth it for the romance and the friendships, and I'm really excited to start it. I think that Little Thieves ended at a point where that plot finishes, and then the next 2 books are the same characters, but they're kind of starting a new thing. And I have heard rumors that the second book ends on a cliffhanger and the next book doesn't come out until 2025. So I'm going to wait a bit to read Painted Devils because I am not prepared for a cliffhanger ending. But Little Thieves, I think you can read. It's not technically a standalone, but I think you can read it and then be like, wow, I can't wait for the next 2 books, right? So, Little Thieves, thank you for everybody for like staying on me about that. Definitely recommend. Next up, really quickly, I read Winter in Sokcho, which I had actually just gone on a trip in winter. It's November, but like it was really cold in Sokcho. I was just there, and so reading this right after having gone to Sokcho and having visited all the places that they mentioned made the book a lot more interesting. I will say that I didn't love it. I didn't love the plot. Everything about it was quite toxic and sad, but I think that was kind of the point. But there was just something about it that the way that it was written, and especially like so much of it was about food and like the preparation of food. Something about that is just really calming. So even though I didn't like anybody in the book, and I thought that I wish the author had kind of gone into everybody's issues a little bit more, this was just really a slice of life. Like I said, just sort of toxic, but like in a, I don't know how to explain it. I didn't love it, but it was a book that I couldn't put down, and I was like really rooting for our main character. So yeah, not one that I loved, and not one I would necessarily like, you've got to read this book. But if you're looking for a very like short, wintry, bleak, melancholy kind of time, Winter in Sokcho. Last two books. I will very quickly say I didn't finish it, but I did start and read a significant portion of What You're Looking For Is in the Library, and this is just a book of short stories about average people who are going through various things in their lives, and they end up finding themselves in the library, and that experience in the library turns their lives around. It's very just kind of inspiring and simple little life things. So I think it would be a really cute book for anybody. Even people who aren't necessarily like readers. I think that the stories were short enough and just interesting enough to be good for someone who wants to read but maybe doesn't have enough time. Even just reading the first story, I like got what the book was about, and I felt like, oh, that touched me. So if you're looking for a holiday gift for someone. But yeah, just I haven't finished it yet, but I love what I've read. But 2 days ago, I picked up, I wanted something I knew was going to suck me in, and I was going to read it real fast, and I read The It Girl by Ruth Ware. I've read a few of this author's books before. They're known for being like the queen of thrillers. The It Girl was available at my library, so I checked it out. This book takes place at Oxford. We have two timelines. We have present day and we have flashbacks, and we follow our main girl who is beginning her life at Oxford. She got accepted. It's her first day. She walks into her dorm, and she shares a dorm, like they're connected via living room, but she shares a space with this girl named April. April is just this magnetic, she's the it girl, right? She's rich, she's gorgeous, she's talented. She's also like very toxic. She plays pranks on people. You never know if she actually likes you, but you just want to be around her kind of girl. And when April is murdered, obviously everything is thrown into chaos. And so present day, we follow our girl who is now living in Edinburgh. She's much older. It's been like 10 plus years since this has happened, and she gets news that the man accused of April's murder has died of a heart attack in prison. And at first, our main girl, Hannah, kind of relieved, but then she realizes that the media is going to start bringing stuff up again. She's dreading the circus that's going to inevitably find her again, because it's just one of those popular true crime, you know, there's all these podcasts about it. And sure enough, a journalist contacts her and starts to make her doubt whether she pointed the finger at the right man. And so the flashback is we follow her before April's death and then a little bit after April's death, and we try to figure out in both timelines who done it. And I just really liked it. It was, I loved that kind of academic setting. I loved that she loved Oxford so much. As much as I could like easily romanticize Oxford, she does too, because she's just so happy to be there. So it was very, just the setting was really good. I enjoyed the characters. They were all, it was very much like a whodunit for a long time. Like I couldn't figure it out. I didn't love the ending, but it was worth the read. And it was quick. It was a thriller. I couldn't stop reading it. The It Girl. Oh my gosh, as my voice gives out, the last book that I finished literally last night. I waited a long time for this as well, even though this came out in 2018. This is The Great Alone. This is by the same author as The Nightingale. This book was not what I expected. I don't know where I saw this book. I don't know why I put it on hold, but I went into it knowing nothing. Ooh, this was just not what I expected. We follow our main girl Lenny when she's about 13, and her family packs up and moves to Alaska. This takes place in the late 70s. Her dad has returned from Vietnam. Not okay. He has a lot of anger issues, a lot of nightmares. He's, as we will find out, abusive physically, and as the book continues he becomes more and more paranoid, so he wants to move to Alaska. He's given a piece of land there and he's like, perfect, we can start a new life there away from everything, right? So they move up there and we follow her through that first winter, which they call The Great Alone in Alaska, and then we follow her a couple years later, now that she's kind of settled there, and her life during when she's 17 in Alaska. It was just one of those books that I couldn't stop reading. A lot of it is them setting up their homestead, so it's a lot of just like them doing chores, and there's something so pleasing about reading people like chopping up wood to make a goat pen, and then they buy a goat and then they milk the goat and then they make the cheese. Like something about reading those kind of tasks I really love. So just like the details of the book I really enjoyed, explaining like just the descriptions of Alaskan nature. They move up there in summer, so they're talking about Alaska during summer, and then it slowly fades into winter, where her father as well gets darker and darker and darker and much more dangerous. So it does become very dark. There's a lot of abuse. You're reading this and you're just like, what's gonna happen to these people? I actually really enjoyed it. I was quite surprised. I will say that probably the 75% mark, I was a little bit like, this could have been shortened a little bit. Not to spoil anything, but you kind of knew, or I had an idea what was going to happen at the end, and I was sort of like, I just want to get there. Yeah, there were some things that were like unbelievable, but there were a lot of things that were really believable, and I didn't know this, but the author actually grew up this way. She grew up in Alaska, she grew up on a homestead, so it was quite realistic, and like just these little details, and like how when you're living in such a small town, you have to rely on each other. You can't be alone in the Great Alone or you will die. There were some parts that were a little hokey, like I said, like a little unbelievable, but overall I thought it was really, really good if you're looking for just a very dramatic, it started to read very much like a thriller in parts. That was The Great Alone. Yeah, that's what I read this month. Quite an interesting mix. A lot of like really dark books, but then a lot of really silly, funny books. So take your pick. And yeah, I devoted a lot of time this month also to filming a plot summary video for you guys. It's not what you expect. I don't want you guys to be disappointed now. Like, you guys are all guessing what I'm doing on Instagram, and it's like, I don't want to spoil it, but like, don't think too big, okay? Something closer to home that I'm going to be doing for like the winter solstice Christmas time, okay? And so if I don't have a video up for next week, I've just kind of ran out of time, so I apologize, but you will have a video on the 22nd/21st for you. So once again, thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Link will be down below, but the first 500 people to use that link will get 1 month free of Skillshare. Highly recommend, especially as we are coming up to a new year, new you. And I'm going to leave you here because my voice is gone and I need to edit this up and get it to you ASAP. So I will catch you guys next time. Love always. Please leave your recommendations down below as always, and all of your thoughts about books that I read, books that I DNF'd. Would love to chat. So see you next time. Love always.